Arequipa, Peru, March 15th, 2011. The clock showed exactly 3:42 in the morning when 4-year-old Mateo Quispe's screams shattered the silence of the family home on San Jose Street. The boy woke up in absolute panic, drenched in cold sweat, shouting words that would freeze his parents' blood in their veins. "The men with feathers threw me down. The sacred stones are crying blood!" Elena Quispe, Mateo's mother, rushed desperately toward her son's room. What she found there left her in complete shock. The boy was sitting upright in bed, his eyes fixed on nothing, speaking with a voice that didn't sound like it belonged to a child. It was deeper, older, carrying the weight of centuries. "They killed me because I told the truth about the gods. I was the guardian of the sacred mountain's secrets." Carlos Quispe, the boy's father and a mechanic from the region, tried everything to calm his son. But Mateo kept speaking about impossible places with haunting precision. The house of the Sun Virgins. The temple where gold melts with the rising sun. The stairway that leads to the spirits. These were specific, detailed descriptions of Machu Picchu that no 4-year-old child should ever know. But this was only the beginning of something that would change the Quispe family's life forever. In the following days, the nightmares repeated themselves with terrifying consistency. Always at the same hour. Always at 3:42 a.m. Always with the same words that seemed to echo from another time, another world entirely. Elena began documenting everything in a journal. She wrote down every word her son spoke during these episodes, every description, every impossible detail. She had no idea that she was recording what specialists would later consider the most disturbing evidence of reincarnation ever documented in Peru. You are about to witness a story that defies everything we think we know about life, death, and memory. A story where a 4-year-old boy reveals archaeological secrets that would only be confirmed years later by professional excavations. Prepare yourself for the most impossible journey ever recorded on Peruvian soil. 3 days after the first nocturnal episode, the Quispe family sat down for their morning breakfast. Everything seemed normal. The sun filtered through the kitchen windows, coffee steamed in ceramic cups. Then, Mateo, playing absently with his toys, released a phrase that changed everything. "Mama, I want to go to my house on the mountain. I already lived there before." Elena's coffee cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Carlos froze mid-bite, his fork suspended in the air. How could a 4-year-old boy born and raised in Arequipa speak about a house on a mountain he had never visited? How could he claim to have lived somewhere before he was even born? But what followed left them completely speechless. Mateo began describing with chilling precision details about Machu Picchu that don't even appear in the Araga tourism books. He spoke about the 72 windows of the main temple, about the water mirror that only fills when it rains during the flower season, about the 13 stairs that descend to the Condor's Cave. "That's where I had my golden altar," the boy said while drawing strange symbols in the air with his small fingers. "The priests came to ask me about the sun's messages. I knew when it would rain. I knew when the earth would tremble." Elena documented every word, her hand shaking as she wrote. Carlos, still unable to believe what he was hearing, decided to investigate. He went to the municipal library that same afternoon and began searching through books on Incan archaeology. What he discovered there made his blood run cold. And many of the details his son had described matched exactly with recent archaeological studies of the Incan citadel. The number of windows, the orientation of certain temples, the location of specific ceremonial spaces, information that wasn't in children's books or tourist guides. But there was something even more disturbing. Mateo had mentioned places in Machu Picchu that aren't open to the public. Secret chambers, underground passages, hidden altars that only archaeologists working in restricted zones would know about. "I was important there," the boy repeated, with a seriousness that sent shivers down his parents' spines. "Everyone respected me until the men with feathers decided I knew too much." Elena felt a deep chill penetrate her bones. How could her 4-year-old son know archaeological secrets that had only been revealed by scientific investigations in recent years? How could he speak of restricted areas he had never seen? What the family didn't know was that this was merely the tip of the iceberg of a story that would challenge everything they believed they knew about reality itself. 2 weeks later, Elena Quispe made a decision that would change everything. "If my son says he knows these places, we're going to prove it," told her husband with determination in her voice. The family traveled 200 kilometers to Lima to visit the National Museum of Archaeology, Anthropology, and History of Peru. What happened there would leave everyone present in absolute shock. Mateo, the moment he entered the Incan culture hall, began behaving in the most disturbing manner. Without any guidance, without looking at any signs, he walked directly toward a display case containing ceremonial objects from the 15th century. He moved with purpose, as if he knew exactly where everything was. Without anyone telling him anything, he pointed at a golden vessel and declared confidently, "This isn't from Machu Picchu, it's from Ollantaytambo. It has the wrong symbol." Dr. Ricardo Espinoza, an archaeologist with 25 years of experience who happened to be giving a tour nearby, approached with curiosity. The plaque on the object clearly stated, "Provenance, Machu Picchu, 15th century." But when Dr. Espinoza checked the digital archives on his tablet, he discovered something that made his hands tremble. The object had been reclassified just 3 months earlier. It originally came from Ollantaytambo and had been incorrectly cataloged for decades. A 4-year-old boy had just corrected a museum's classification error. But this was only the beginning. Mateo stopped in front of a replica of the Intihuatana, the sacred stone of Machu Picchu. His small face grew serious, almost stern. "This is wrong," he said with the confidence of an expert scholar. "The real stone has a crack here." He pointed to a specific spot on the base with his tiny finger. "That's where the blood fell during the last sacrifice." Dr. Espinoza felt the color drain from his face. The information about that specific crack was known only to archaeologists who worked directly at Machu Picchu. It had never been published in any book or public documentation. It was insider knowledge, the kind shared only among professionals in private conversations. Elena filmed everything with her phone, her hands shaking so badly the footage would later come out blurry. Her 4-year-old son was correcting professionals. He was pointing out errors in museum exhibitions. He was revealing details that only the most advanced specialists would know. "How does he know all this?" Dr. Espinoza asked the parents, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena responded with tears streaming down her face. "He says he lived there in another life." The archaeologist remained silent for long, uncomfortable seconds. The fluorescent lights of the museum hummed overhead. Other visitors walked past, oblivious to the impossible scene unfolding before them. Finally, Dr. Espinoza said something he never thought he would say in his entire career. "We need to take this boy to Cusco." 3 months after the incident at the museum, Mateo's obsession with Machu Picchu became uncontrollable. The boy spent hours drawing detailed maps of the citadel with crayons and markers. He constructed replicas using stones from the backyard, arranging them with geometric precision that seemed impossible for a child his age. But the most disturbing development was something else entirely. Mateo began speaking in a language his parents didn't recognize. Elena recorded these nocturnal conversations on her phone. Mateo, while apparently asleep, would whisper strange words in the darkness of his room. Intita kai pachapikani, mamakila, alin kausai. When they consulted with a professor of native languages at San Agustin University, the response left them frozen with disbelief. This is archaic Quechua, the professor explained, his face pale. A dialect that was spoken during the time of the Incan Empire. It hasn't been commonly used for 500 years. My son has never studied Quechua, Elena explained, her voice breaking. We were born in Arequipa. We've spoken Spanish our entire lives. He's 4 years old. The situation became unsustainable when Mateo began refusing food, saying it wasn't like the food from the sacred mountain. He drew plants that he claimed grew in his personal garden. He described dawn ceremonies where the temple's gold would dance with the first light of the rising sun. Carlos, who had initially been the skeptic in the family, made the most important decision of his life. He would use the family's savings to travel to Cusco. If this can help our son, it's worth it, he told his wife, holding her hands. I don't understand what's happening, but I know we need to find out. The bus journey from Arequipa to Cusco takes 10 hours through winding mountain roads. During the entire trip, Mateo remained silent, his small face pressed against the window, watching the landscape pass by. But his silence wasn't the empty quiet of a bored child. It was the focused attention of someone who recognized every mountain, every valley, every curve of the road. His eyes moved with purpose, tracking landmarks that seemed to hold meaning only for him. But when the bus approached the imperial city and the sacred mountains appeared on the horizon, something happened that no camera could fully capture. Mateo broke into tears. It wasn't the crying of a frightened child. It wasn't a tantrum or a complaint. It was the deep, heart-wrenching sob of someone returning home after centuries of absence. The kind of crying that comes from a place deeper than childhood, deeper than memory as we understand it. I've arrived, he whispered between tears, his small body trembling. Father, soon. I've come home. Elena held her son tightly, without fully understanding what she was witnessing. Carlos gripped the seat in front of him, his knuckles white. Other passengers on the bus turned to look, their faces confused. But one thing was certain. The real test was only just beginning. July 6th, 2011. 5:47 in the morning. The first train to Aguascalientes departed from San Pedro Station in Cusco, carrying the Quispe family toward the moment that would change their lives forever. The morning fog clung to the mountains like a burial shroud. The train's wheels clicked rhythmically against the tracks as they descended into the sacred valley. During the 90-minute journey, Mateo remained glued to the window, pointing at specific locations with unsettling accuracy. There's where the women who wove for the Inca lived, he said, pointing toward Ollantaytambo as the ancient fortress emerged from the mist. There's the fortress where they kept the gold, he indicated, looking at the distant ruins of Pisac perched on the mountainside. Each identification was perfectly accurate according to official archaeological information. A 4-year-old was narrating the history of the sacred valley like a seasoned tour guide. But nothing prepared them for what happened when they finally set foot in Machu Picchu. Mateo, who until that moment had been a normal 4-year-old child with normal fears and normal hesitations, transformed completely. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside him. His posture changed, his eyes changed, even his breathing changed. He walked with a confidence that chilled the blood, directing himself toward specific areas as if he had lived there his entire life, as if these ancient stones were more familiar to him than his own home in Arequipa. Without following the normal tourist path, the boy guided his parents through an alternative route that most visitors don't know exists. He led them directly to the zone known as the Sacred Rock, a ceremonial altar located in the northern part of the citadel. Elena filmed every step, her phone battery already at 50%. Carlos walked in silence, still processing the impossible. The morning sun was beginning to burn away the fog, revealing the ancient city in all its impossible glory. Then Mateo stopped abruptly in front of a precipice overlooking the Urubamba River, 400 meters below. His face changed completely. His eyes filled with terror, as if he were reliving something traumatic. His small body began to shake. His breathing became rapid and shallow. That's where I died," he said with a voice that didn't sound like a 4-year-old boy. It was deeper, older, filled with the weight of ancient grief. "The men with feathers brought me here at dawn. They said I had betrayed the gods because I predicted that white men would come from the Great Salt Lake." He pointed with military precision toward a specific rock formation on the cliff's edge. "They made me kneel there. They cut me here." He touched his neck with trembling fingers. "And then they threw me into the void so the condors could clean my soul." Elena stopped recording. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. Mateo looked toward the abyss, toward the rushing river far below, toward the jagged rocks and the endless sky above. And then, he whispered something that froze his parents' blood in their veins. "But my spirit never left. I waited 500 years to be able to return and tell the truth." After the traumatic revelation at the precipice, the Quispe family spent the night at a small hotel in Aguascalientes. None of them could sleep. Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Carlos paced the small room like a caged animal. The sounds of the Urubamba River rushing past filled the darkness outside their window. But at exactly 3:42 in the morning, the same hour as the nightmares in Arequipa, Mateo woke up with a specific mission burning in his eyes. "Papa, we need to go back tomorrow. I have to show you where my sacred blade is buried," the boy said with a lucidity that terrified his parents. His voice was calm, certain, carrying none of the confusion of a child woken from sleep. "If they don't find it, nobody will believe that I am Amaru." For the first time, Mateo revealed his name from the past life. Amaru. The word hung in the air like smoke from ancient incense. The next day, under a sky heavy with clouds that threatened rain, the boy guided his parents to an apparently ordinary zone of the archaeological complex near the Temple of the Sun. The morning tourists hadn't arrived yet. The ancient stones were wet with dew. Mateo walked with purpose. He counted his steps out loud. 123, 124, 125, 126, 127. He stopped and pointed at the ground with millimetric precision. "Here is my blade," he declared, his small finger aimed at a patch of earth that looked exactly like every other patch around it. 3 meters underground, wrapped in red textiles. I hid it before they captured me, because I knew they would come for me." Elena wrote down every detail in her journal, her handwriting shaky but determined. Carlos measured the distance with his own steps. Indeed, it was exactly 127 steps from the Temple of the Sun in a southeast direction, forming a 45-degree angle with the main wall. "There's also a gold necklace with 21 turquoise beads," Mateo added, his eyes distant, as if seeing through the earth itself. "And a small vessel with ashes of sacred coca that I prepared for my last ritual." But here comes the most disturbing part of all. The boy knelt down and began drawing in the damp earth. He sketched a map showing exactly what was buried below. He specified depths, materials, and relative positions of each object. These were coordinates so precise they seemed like the work of a professional archaeologist, not a 4-year-old child who had never held a measuring tape in his life. "When the archaeologists dig here," Mateo said with absolute certainty, looking up at his parents with ancient eyes in a child's face, "they're going to find exactly what I'm telling them, and they're going to understand that Amaru really existed." Carlos took photographs of everything, the measurements, the drawings, the exact coordinates scratched into the Peruvian soil. Without knowing it, he was documenting what would become the most precise archaeological prophecy ever recorded in human history. The question that froze the blood of both parents was simple but terrifying. What if they actually find something? September 18th, 2011. 2 months and 11 days after Mateo's revelations at Machu Picchu, something extraordinary happened that would shake the foundations of archaeological science. Dr. Ricardo Espinoza, the same archaeologist who had met the boy at the National Museum in Lima, obtained official authorization to conduct an exploratory excavation at the exact coordinates Mateo had indicated. The permit came after Espinoza presented the case to the Ministry of Culture as an archaeological verification investigation based on traditional oral testimonies. Officially, he never mentioned that the coordinates came from a 4-year-old boy who claimed to be the reincarnation of an Incan priest. Some truths are too strange for government paperwork. The excavation began at 6:30 in the morning. Mist still clung to the ancient stones. The team included Dr. Espinoza, 2 assistant archaeologists, a surveyor, and a specialist in pre-Columbian textile conservation, Dr. Carmen Hossa. 5 professionals, armed with brushes and trowels and decades of combined experience, about to unearth the impossible. They dug carefully, methodically, layer by layer. Hours passed. The sun rose higher. Sweat dripped from their faces. At exactly 2.87 meters of depth, 13 centimeters less than the 3 meters Mateo had predicted, Dr. Espinoza's shovel struck something solid. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "There's something here!" What they extracted from the soil left the entire team in absolute silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They simply stared at the object emerging from 5 centuries of darkness. Wrapped in red textiles, perfectly preserved exactly as the boy had described, they found a ceremonial blade of pure gold. 23 carats, 18 centimeters long by 12 centimeters wide. The metal gleamed in the morning sun as if it had been buried yesterday, not half a millennium ago. But this was only the beginning. 40 centimeters from the blade, they found the necklace. It wasn't 21 turquoise beads, as Mateo had said. It was 22. An insignificant error that paradoxically made the prediction even more credible. If it had been invented, if the boy had somehow researched and fabricated this story, it would have been exact. The slight imperfection proved authenticity in a way perfection never could. The small vessel was exactly where the child said it would be. Laboratory analysis conducted weeks later confirmed that it contained organic remains corresponding to ceremonially burned coca leaves, the same sacred plant the Incas had used in their most important rituals. But the most impactful revelation came when they analyzed the golden blade itself. The engravings on its surface represented ceremonies of astronomical prediction and rituals of communication with ancestors. But most chilling of all were the scenes depicted on one side of the blade. Scenes of ritual sacrifice at the exact zone of the precipice where Mateo had said he was killed. The images showed a figure being led to a cliff's edge. They showed priests with feathered headdresses. They showed a body falling toward rushing water below. Carbon-14 analysis confirmed that all objects dated from the 15th century, exactly the period of the Incan Empire that Mateo had mentioned. The science was irrefutable. The dates matched, the locations matched, everything matched. Dr. Espinoza made the most difficult decision of his career. He picked up his phone with trembling hands and dialed Elena Quispe's number. "Mrs. Quispe, I need you to come to Lima urgently. Bring Mateo." His voice trembled in a way Elena had never heard from the composed scientist. "We found everything exactly where your son said it would be." 3 days later, in the archaeology laboratory of the National University of San Marcos, something happened that no scientific camera had ever documented before in the history of Peru. Mateo entered the laboratory and saw for the first time the objects he himself had predicted. His reaction left everyone present frozen in place. He showed no surprise. He asked no questions. He simply approached the golden blade like it was a familiar object he had temporarily misplaced and finally recovered, the way you might approach your favorite coffee mug after finding it in an unexpected cabinet. "This is mine," he said with absolute naturalness, running his small fingers along the edge without quite touching it. "Here I engraved the prophecy of the white men who would come from the Great Salt Lake." Dr. Espinoza turned on a professional recorder. What he was about to capture would change his understanding of reality forever. Mateo began speaking about the engravings on the blade with blood-freezing precision. He described each symbol, each figure, ceremonial detail, as if he had personally created them 500 years ago. His small finger traced patterns in the air that matched the patterns on the gold. But the most disturbing part was that he spoke in archaic Quechua, the same dialect he had used during his nightmares, a language no 4-year-old in modern Peru should know. Dr. Carmen Josa, specialist in pre-Columbian languages, translated simultaneously, her voice barely above a whisper. "I, Amaru, guardian of the secrets of Inti, predict the arrival of the bearded ones of cold metal. They will bring the destruction of the golden time, but also the seed of a new dawn." But here comes the most chilling revelation of all. Mateo picked up the vessel of coca ashes and brought it close to his face. He breathed deeply, inhaling the ancient dust of sacred leaves burned half a millennium ago. And his eyes changed completely. For a moment, he stopped being a 4-year-old boy. He became something older, wiser, deeper. Something that had seen empires rise and fall, that had watched centuries pass like seasons. "I knew I would return," he said with a voice that was not his own. It was deeper, resonant, carrying harmonics that seemed impossible from such a small chest. "I knew my soul would come back in the time of flying machines and mirrors that speak. I returned to warn about what comes next." In the recording, something appears that none of those present perceived in the moment. A second voice, deeper, more ancient, speaking simultaneously with Mateo in pure Quechua. Elena's hair stood on end when she heard the recording days later. Her 4-year-old son and the spirit of a 500-year-old priest had been speaking at the same time, their voices layered like harmonies in an impossible song. Dr. Espinoza knew he needed more than archaeological objects to validate this impossible story. He needed historical records, independent verification from sources that had nothing to do with a 4-year-old boy from Arequipa. What he discovered in the colonial archives of Cusco left him speechless for 3 consecutive days. In the documents of Spanish chronicler Pedro Cieza de León, dated 1553, he found a specific reference that chilled his blood. A priest named Amaru was executed at the fortress of Pichu, accused of heresy for predicting the arrival of the bearded ones from the sea. The Incan nobles considered him dangerous for his visions of the future. But there was more, much more. In the archives of the General Archive of the Indies in Seville, Spain, a document from 1547 mentioned textually, "The heretic Amaru of Pichu was thrown from the sacred precipice after refusing to retract his prophecies about the destruction of the empire. His followers assure that he will return when Tawantinsuyu needs a new awakening." Dr. Espinoza contacted Dr. Miguel Cornejo, a historian specializing in colonial chroniclers at the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru. When he presented the evidence, the objects, the recordings, the historical records, the academic's response left him petrified. "Ricardo, this priest Amaru really existed," Dr. Cornejo confirmed after 2 weeks of intensive research. "But there's something more disturbing. The documents indicate he was executed exactly in the place the boy describes, the north precipice of Machu Picchu, at dawn after a ceremonial trial." The date of execution, according to Colonial records, was March 15, 1533, exactly 478 years before Mateo's first nightmares, which began on March 15, 2011. The same date, separated by nearly 5 centuries, connected by a child's screams in the night. The documents also revealed chilling details about Amaru's predictions. He spoke of machines that fly like metal condors, of mirrors that showed distant people, of a time when children would speak with the voices of ancestors. But the most impactful revelation came when Dr. Cornejo found a specific document in the Vatican archives. A letter from the Cusco bishop to the Pope, dated 1548, describing the blasphemous prophecies of the heretic Amaru about the return of Incan souls in the bodies of mestizo children when the world changes millennium. Elena received this information by phone. Her hands trembled so much she couldn't hold the device steady. She had to put it on speaker and set it on the table. Her 4-year-old son had not only predicted where to find archaeological objects, he had returned exactly when a 500-year-old Incan priest had prophesied he would return. The circle was closing in the most impossible way ever documented. Today, 13 years after those first nightmares, Mateo Quispe is 17 years old and lives an apparently normal life in Arequipa. He studies civil engineering at the local university. He plays soccer with his friends on weekends. He maintains a typical romantic relationship for someone his age. He worries about exams and weekend plans like any other teenager. But every March 15th, on the anniversary of his first nightmare and of Amaru's death, something extraordinary continues to happen. Something he doesn't discuss with his friends. Something only his family knows about. Elena preserves all the records, the recordings, the photographs, the archaeological reports, the historical documents. What began as the diary of a worried mother became the most complete archive of reincarnation evidence documented in Latin America. Boxes upon boxes of evidence in their family home. Dr. Espinoza, now director of the Andean Archaeology Department at the National University of San Marcos, included Mateo's case in 3 international scientific publications. Although he never explicitly mentions the word reincarnation, his papers on ancestral knowledge transmitted through non-conventional pathways have generated debates in universities worldwide. From Harvard to Oxford, scholars argue about the implications. But the story doesn't end with Mateo. Since 2015, other similar cases have appeared in different regions of Peru. Quechua-speaking children from Andean communities who describe with precision archaeological places they have never visited, who speak languages they were never taught, who know secrets buried for centuries. The National Institute of Educational Research and Extension has officially documented 23 cases in the last 8 years. 23 children. 23 impossible stories. 23 windows into something science cannot yet explain. Dr. Carmen Josa, now specialized in studying these phenomena, has established a research protocol that includes recordings in archaic Quechua, linguistic analysis, and archaeological verifications. We are facing a phenomenon that defies our Western conceptions about memory and consciousness, she declares in her most recent study. Something is happening in the Andes. Something ancient is waking up. Mateo visited Machu Picchu for the last time in July 2023. This time, he went alone, as part of a farewell journey to the place that marked his childhood. He was no longer a terrified 4-year-old. He was a young man, making peace with his past, both lives of it. The park rangers reported something inexplicable. During the 40 minutes he remained at the precipice where Amaru was executed, not a single condor flew over the zone. This was unprecedented in the sanctuary's ornithological records. The great birds, usually ever present, had vanished from the sky, as if in respect. When asked about his memories of past lives, Mateo responds with the wisdom of someone much older than his 17 years. I don't need to remember everything anymore. I fulfilled my purpose. The world needed to know that death is not the end, and that souls return when they have pending missions. But what mission did Amaru's soul really have? What truth was so important that it required 5 centuries and 2 lifetimes to tell? And what other secrets from the past are waiting to return through new generations? The answer to these questions perhaps lies in the next child who wakes up screaming on a March night, speaking of impossible places and lives they shouldn't remember. Because if the story of Mateo Quispe has taught us anything, it's that there are mysteries in this world that science still cannot explain. Mysteries that the universe insists on showing us, whether we're ready to see them or not. And somewhere in the Andes, right now, another child might be dreaming of ancient stones and sacred mountains, preparing to tell us secrets that have waited centuries to be heard. The question isn't whether these stories are real. The question is, are we ready to listen?